Okay, so I'm going to do a really, really quick program right now showing you how to create a method that just does stuff and doesn't actually return a value. And that kind of method is a method with the return value of void. And we've been doing this all along. Every time you write a main program, our main method has a return type of void. It doesn't return a value, it just does a bunch of stuff. And we're going to create a method of this type that just, you give it a number and it tells you whether or not that number is prime. It doesn't return a Boolean, it just prints out, yes, it is prime, or no, it's not prime. And so that's going to be our method. So I'm just going to really quick paste some code in here. I'm going to create a new scanner. I'm going to ask the user for a number. You give me an integer and I will tell you if it is prime. And I'm going to read in a value called my number. So I need a method. And I usually put my methods before main. I actually don't think you have to do that in Java. It's just a habit I have. Because when Java compiles, it compiles all those methods separately. So I'm going to need a public method. It's going to be static because it's not connected to a particular object. And it's going to be a return type void, just like my main method. And I'm going to call it IsItPrime. And it's going to have one argument that is going to be an integer. I'll just call it n, I guess. Method will print whether the number is prime. And then I'm going to need a close brace for that method. And I'm just going to go ahead and label that. And what do I call it? IsItPrime method. Okay. I should have that tabbed over a little bit. So how do we find out if a number is prime? Well, I divide it through all the numbers from 1 to n over 2, and I see if it has any factors. We've done this a million times. I'm just going to take some code from a previous program and paste it in here. Okay. So I'm going to create an integer. I'm going to call it factor. I'm going to have a for loop that goes from, do we need to call this number? No, we don't even need this. We just need this. This is just old prime number code that we've used before. From factor equals 2 up to, we call this n now, n over 2. If n divided by factor equals 0, then what do we need to do? If n modulo factor is equal to 0, that means it's not prime because I found a factor. So I can just print your number is not prime. And then I break out of my loop. Okay, so I give it an n. I start with the number 2. I start dividing by the numbers up to half the number. If n modulo factor is equal to 0, I know I found a factor. I print your number is not prime. And then I break out of the loop. If I get all the way to the end of the for loop and I haven't done that, I know my number is prime. So if I'm not returning a value, I just need to print your number is prime. If I make it to the end of my for loop, I should be able to just print my number is prime, and then it'll print that. I'm a little bit worried the way I've written it now, though. Like, I go through my loop, I don't find any factors, it prints your number as prime. That's fine. I go through my loop, it does find factors. It breaks out of the for loop, but it will still do this. Like, I think it'll print this twice. Just breaking isn't enough here. I've got to get out of the method. Let's keep going, and we'll see that happen. We'll see why this isn't quite going to... It's going to almost work, but it's not quite going to work. We'll come back and explain why it's not quite going to work. So there's my method. Now I need to call it in order to get it to do anything. So my number equals scanner.nextInt, and then I call my function IsItPrime. Sorry, my method. My brain sometimes defaults back to other languages with my number. Boop. Semicolon. Okay, this should almost work. Let's give it a number that, what should I start with? One that is prime or one that isn't prime? I should give it one that is prime first. So I'll give it 31. Your number is prime. Good. Now I'll give it one that is not prime. 32. Ahaha. It prints your number is not prime, but then it still gets to this line here. Where'd it go? This. It still gets to that line because even though this breaks out of the for loop, when it gets to the end of the for loop, it still executes this line. I didn't have a Boolean variable, is it prime, is it not prime? I'm just counting on the program flow to get me out of here when I find a prime. One way to do that is to change this break to a return. A return doesn't just break out of the loop. A return breaks out of the whole method. So if I run it now and enter 32, my number is not prime. If I run it and enter 31, my number is prime. Okay? So this return statement here doesn't return a value. This just gets me out of the method and back to main. Okay. It returns me from the method I'm in. It doesn't return a value to main because the return type of this method is void. It just does something. What does it do? It prints either your number is prime or your number is not prime. It doesn't return a value. But putting a return statement with no parentheses inside of a method just kicks you out of the method and kicks you back to main. Okay, so we never get to this line. We never get here unless we didn't return in the for loop. Okay. So that's a really, really simple example of a method whose return type is void, so that it performs some sort of function, but it does not return a numerical value or a true false or any kind of variable back to main after it's called. Something that's worth noting about this, let me run it again. Okay, I've got what's a prime number? Is 97 prime? I don't know if 97 is prime. Yes, 97 is prime. Notice when I collapse my two methods here, so my program's got two methods, right? It's got my main method, it's got my IsItPrime method, that it doesn't matter. Control X, Control V. Okay, run it again. Oh, darn. I copied my method, but I did not. Oh, I just when I typed 97 for some reason it went into the window. That's just me making typing mistakes. What have I done? Oh, I accidentally deleted the word void. I'm trying to show you something very, very simple here, and I keep making mistakes while I do it. Give me a number, integer, and I'll tell you if the value 101. 101 is prime. What I was trying to show you, and I kept making mistakes while trying to show it to you, is that it does not matter if your methods are before your main or after your main. Here, my IsItPrime method is before main. Okay. Here, it is after main. Okay, I can run it again. Okay, 103. 103 is prime. When Java compiles your code, it compiles all those methods individually, so any of them can call the others no matter what order they're in. This wasn't always true of all languages. There were some old languages that required any functions that you're going to use later to be declared and defined up front. I tend to, even when I'm writing Java, write my other classes and methods at the front end and put my main at the end. But this is just to show you that you don't have to do it that way. You can have your other classes and methods at the end. Java should not care what order you have them in. Okay? If you don't make a whole bunch of mistakes while typing. 71 is prime. Okay? So there's an example of a method of return type void that just does some stuff but doesn't actually send a value back to the place where it was called.